Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering female Spider-Man crushed. There's no such thing as a Spider-Man universe. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. Okay, so Sony had a great idea. They said, hey, we've got the rights to Spider-Man. So let's go ahead and spin out as many characters as we can. Let's build out this Spider-Man universe. I don't even disagree with that idea. Obviously, they had a huge amount of success when it came to Venom. But you can't just say, look, I hereby declare we have a universe. You've got to think through what's really going to be the connective tissue within the story, within the characters, within their world. How are they going to interact? If you've got a main character who is obviously Spider-Man, Spider-Man should have been somehow in this movie. If you can't do that, and it's a terrible thing if the contracts don't allow it, and of course the Disney contracts probably don't allow that, at the very least, where's Venom? Why not feature Venom somehow in this movie? How do these characters all fit together? Why, if I love Spider-Man, why, if I love Venom, do I need to go see Madam Web to understand these female Spider-Man characters and appreciate the Spider-Man universe? Those questions weren't answered. So this movie comes out, it's ill-conceived, it's almost like the Marvel's version of the Spider-Man universe, the Brie Larson project that failed. This one failed as well. Why do we have 3 female Spider-Man characters in their own film that created no buzz? I mean, Sydney Sweeney creates buzz on her own, but not enough to get people to go see the movie. The financial results for this movie are in, and they are absolutely terrible. I can promise you there are very few people who care about Spider-Man who felt like they needed to go see Madam Web to stay up and current with what's going on with this Spider-Man universe. They didn't plan it right, they didn't cultivate it, and now they need to deal with the box office results. Coming from The Hollywood Reporter, inside Sony's Madam Web collapse, forget about a new franchise. The flop is wiping out an entire plan for a new movie series as Sony becomes the latest superhero studio in need of a pivot. From Cosmic Book News, Madam Web box office bombs with $25.8 million. Sony's Spider-Man spin-off universe fails to deliver again. Because it's not a universe. You can't just declare that you have a universe and expect people to say, okay, I care about the characters, I care about the story, because you declared it. You didn't show me the story, you didn't show me any connections, it wasn't part of any of the marketing, really. Some sort of a visual similarity that makes it look like a parody is not enough to get me interested. You can't just declare it. You can't just say like Michael Scott did in The Office, I declare bankruptcy. You can't just say it. There are things you have to do to make it a reality. Sony didn't do that. Coming from The Direct, Madam Web's bad reviews explained 6 biggest criticisms. Coming from The Hollywood Reporter, inside Sony's Madam Web collapse, forget about a new franchise. The trailer buzz was worrisome, advanced ticket sales anemic. Then last week, the critic reviews for Madam Web were posted, and they stung deepest of all. Sony's Spider-Man spin-off received the lowest average Rotten Tomatoes score, 13%, of any major superhero film in nearly a decade. Quote, on Wednesday night, you could actually watch advanced purchase sales declining in real time as buyers were refunding their tickets. It marked one of the lowest starts in Hollywood history for a film based on a Marvel character. Domestic box office for the first 6 days in North America was just $26.2 million after opening midweek on Valentine's Day. International tallied $25.7 million from 61 markets. Even the fan-friendly cinema score grade was poor, C+, extremely low for a superhero title. Like DC and the once unstoppable Marvel, Sony is now finding itself under the gun to reevaluate how it makes comic book movies. Sony's previous Spider-Man universe movie, 2022's Morbius, was a critical bust and much maligned by fanboys online, but at least it managed to earn $170 million worldwide. There's no such hope for Madam Web. Plus, the feature's collapse doesn't just impact this film, but a new potential franchise led by star Dakota Johnson that Sony had hoped to spin out. Spoiler alert, her character is connected to Peter Parker, whose birth is documented in the movie. And the reason why that doesn't make it part of a universe is because no one feels like that's real. None of these characters broke through enough to be taken as legitimately important to the story. Everyone knew this was going to be forgotten. You have to cross a certain threshold of quality of story and character before you can get actual fans to take it seriously. And this is why they really should have consulted fans. This is where Disney and the rest of them have gone so far afield and lost so many people's interest. They haven't consulted fans. They've attacked fans, but they haven't asked fans, hey, do you find this compelling? They haven't had feedback from fans. They don't reach out to the comic book people who know these characters and know these stories. I know some of the editors who've worked on Marvel Comics before. I particularly know one of the guys who did a lot with Spider-Man. And would you think they would have reached out to him to ask him what he thought with any of these story ideas? No, they didn't. And that's why they get these results. The film introduced a trio of supporting characters played by Isabella Merced, Celeste O'Connor, and Sydney Sweeney, now one of the top stars of her age. It set up a future in which the three could have become a team of Spider-Women under the guiding eye of Johnson's Cassie Webb. Now that's not going to happen. What they really should have done is introduce one character, made one compelling character, and figured out how that character tied in with Spider-Man really and tied in with Venom. Really figure it out in a compelling way so that fans want to follow it if they follow Spider-Man. They didn't do that. But we're not going to see another Madam Web movie for another decade plus, quipped one industry veteran. It failed. Sony tried to make a movie that was a different type of superhero movie. You will never see another Madam Web movie. The character may appear again in someone else's movie. Maybe they'll be in Venom somewhere or something like that. But you're never going to see another Madam Web movie, I can promise you that. Madam Web joins a troubling trend for the superhero genre. Every live-action comic book movie last year underperformed, aside from Marvel Studios' Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Regardless of studio, superhero fatigue has evolved from a term used by some corners of the fandom to something reluctantly accepted as an industry fact. And it's coming at a time when Marvel, DC, and Sony are all attempting the difficult work of birthing new franchises. So Madam Web, directed and co-written by S.J. Clarkson, and starring Johnson as a New York paramedic who develops psychic powers, seemingly took a wise approach. When there are capes and cowls on every metropolis corner, doesn't it make sense to avoid the usual tropes and try for a more grounded feeling suspense thriller with low-key charm? And moreover, make a superhero movie for women and young girls? Except it didn't work. Quote, I don't know if women are enough to carry the box office here, one veteran studio source outside of Sony says. Indeed, males make up 65% to 70% of the superhero audience in North America. In the case of Madam Web, the percentage of female viewers was still only 46%. It's as if they thought The Marvels was going to be some sort of a huge hit. I don't know who thought that was going to be a hit. You can't look at the box office of The Marvels and say, oh, well, Captain Marvel 1 did more than $1 billion, so of course the sequel is going to do well, probably at least half the money. That would still be great. So let's do something similar to The Marvels, but let's use the Spider-Man franchise. Could anyone have seriously done that? It looks like that's exactly what they did here. They discounted the fact that The Marvels was never going to do well. That Captain Marvel 2, the sequel to Captain Marvel, which wound up being The Marvels, never had a chance. Captain Marvel only did well because Marvel hadn't ruined its reputation yet. Captain Marvel was also part of the Avengers story. People had to go see that because when they planned out the universe for Marvel and the MCU originally, it did kind of fit together, and to understand the whole story, you would have to see all the related movies. But it didn't work for the Marvels, and it didn't work here. Well, we're in a transition when it comes to superhero movies, notes the Insider. I don't know how big that transition is or what the other side looks like. It may be fewer movies, but bigger brands. Sony is willing to take some risk, but also wants home runs. And if Sony's upcoming Spider-Man universe title, Kraven, is a gigantic hit, the narrative could be completely different. The current mood on the Sony lot is gloomy, an insider says. The studio has certainly had notable wins under movie chief Tom Rothman's tenure, including the Oscar-nominated Spider-Verse series and live-action Venom. A third Venom starring Tom Hardy is due out November 8th, and Rothman is known for keeping a close watch over budgets, and it's been widely reported that Madam Web cost $80 million. But the actual number is in the low $100 million range, according to several sources. Still, it's far less than the $200 to $300 million routinely spent by Marvel and DC. Interestingly, some Madame Web viewers are earnestly making the case that the film could eventually find a second life as a camp classic. While such backhanded compliments are hardly solace to Sony, there's an argument to be made if you're going to fail, you might as well fail big. Because there's actually something worse than a movie not succeeding, and that's being forgettable. Well, it depends what the financials are, but this movie just didn't work. Coming from the direct, Madame Web's bad reviews explain 6 biggest criticisms. The 6 things wrong with Sony's Madame Web. Madame Web's awful dialogue. One of the biggest criticisms of Madame Web's bad reviews has come from the script, not just panning the story, but also the dialogue. The dialogue between the movie's female leads and the villain has been described by moviegoers across social media as cringeworthy, unnatural, and generally awful. The divisive language has also led to criticisms from some regarding the leads' performances and their delivery of the lines. However, others have defended the acclaimed stars such as Dakota Johnson and Sydney Sweeney, claiming they delivered the best acting they could with the script they were given. One line of dialogue from the trailer didn't make it into the final cut of Madame Web after becoming a viral meme and joke. It saw Cassandra Webb declare, quote, "He was in the Amazon with my mom when he was researching spiders right before she died," in reference to Ezekiel Sims' history with her mother in Peru. A bland and uninteresting story. Going beyond the awful screenplay, the story for Madame Web has also been the subject of backlash, as many have struggled to get on board with the premise. The premise of Madame Web protecting 3 future superheroes from certain death may sound intriguing at first. At least that would be the case until one realizes that leads to a superhero tale without any actual superheroes, and off that only minimal action that largely involves Ezekiel crawling after the group. Then, right when the constant chase between Ezekiel and the girls is heating up, Madame Web pauses a return trip to Peru for Cassandra to learn more about her powers and history, conveniently just in time for the climactic battle. On top of all the issues and flaws with the main storyline, the birth of Peter Parker becomes a B-lot in the movie that has no real reason to be there. Some have theorized the original premise of Madame Web saw Ezekiel Sims try to prevent the future Spider-Man from being born before the focus later shifted to the 3 girls. Ezekiel Sims is a terrible villain. On top of the many issues with the story and dialogue, Madame Web's main villain, Ezekiel Sims, has been criticized by fans as one of the worst antagonists in superhero movie history. It probably doesn't help that his villain costume looks straight out of a low-budget fan film. His motivations in Madame Web are simple: to save his life from certain doom after seeing visions of himself being killed by the 3 Spider-Women. Years before the Sony's Flicks event, he served as security to Cassandra Webb's mother, Constance, during a trip to Peru where he acquired his Spider-Man-esque powers. And that is about all fans know about Ezekiel Sims, as Madame Web offered no such explanation of how he became so wealthy, acquired his Spider-Man-inspired suit, or why the Spider-Women are after him in this alternate future. Not to mention, as Ezekiel is defeated by 3 powerless teenage girls and a newly powered Madame Web, despite having seemingly had his Spider-Man abilities for many years, he becomes hard to take seriously as a real threat. Where are the Spider-Women? Despite being prominently featured in the trailers, posters, and other marketing, the 3 superhero suits, along with the girls using their powers, appear in Madame Web for a matter of seconds, and only in visions of the future. Not only has this left many moviegoers feeling misled by the frustratingly misled marketing, but it left Madame Web almost devoid of action and lacking much of what is expected from the superhero genre. In fact, across Madame Web, the 3 girls serve more as damsels in distress than real characters, as they contribute very little outside of electric shocking Ezekiel through the ambulance and giving Cassandra CPR. Frustrating Spider-Man connections. Madame Web does have more wall crawler connections than the rest of Sony's Spider-Man universe, but that isn't usually a good thing. For one, the movie contains a sizable subplot about Ben Parker, Uncle Ben, and his sister Mary Parker's imminent childbirth of the Spider-Man-to-be Peter Parker. Despite these significant connections, they often come across as meaningless. For example, the movie contains a guessing game over the baby's name, although Peter Parker is never uttered in the 2-hour runtime. Not to mention, there are several vague references to Uncle Ben's famous "with great power comes great responsibility" speech, including the line, "and when you take on responsibility, great power will come," in the movie's climax. Speaking of Ben, he alludes to having met someone, teasing the relationship as being rather serious in clear reference to Aunt May-to-be. While fans have been begging to see Sony's Spider-Man universe finally bring the wall crawler into play, the vague references combined with the large absence of the Spider-Women come across more as the studio winking at the audience rather than anything meaningful or relevant to the actual storyline. Look, it's not like making movies is an easy thing to do. Of course, Sony has to try. They will take their punishment by losing a lot of money on this movie. But they do need to make more of an effort to plan things out in advance and make sure that fans who love Spider-Man, who love anything related to Spider-Man, will be interested in whatever it is they're actually doing. Venom 3 will probably do very well. The next Spider-Man movie will also probably do very well because it's Spider-Man. If they're really going to take Spider-Man and build out a movie universe with it, they've got to do better than this. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.